Welcome to our lesson about working with a design table. A design table, as with configurations, is another way to create variations of a part. Now let's go to Options, Document Properties tab, Units branch. I'm using millimeters, grams, and seconds as my units of measurement. Now let's right-click on the top plane and select Insert Sketch. Activate the Rectangle tool, and let's drop a rectangle about here. Let's Smart Dimension it now. Let's say 50 millimeters for this dimension. OK. And 50 millimeters here also. OK. Now when I apply dimensions, SOLIDWORKS by default creates names for those dimensions. Let's select here. See, we have D2 at Sketch 1. Here's D1 at Sketch 1. So that we can more easily recognize these dimensions later on, I'm going to rename them with something more descriptive. Let's rename D1 at Sketch 1 to Length. And let's rename the second dimension now. We'll call it Width, W. And let's exit the sketch. It's a good idea to rename the sketch as well to make it easier to recognize from which entity come the dimensions that you're working with. Give it a slow double click to activate the rename field, and then press Enter to accept your new name. Okay, let's activate the Extruded Boss Base tool. Select our sketch. 10 millimeter is fine. Click OK. Let's rename this parameter as well. To do so, right-click on the Annotations folder and select Show Feature Dimensions. Let's select the 10 millimeter dimension. This dimension I'm going to call H, which stands for height. Let's click OK. Now we're ready to insert a design table. Let's go to Insert, Tables, and select Design Table. For the source option, let's use Auto Create, and click OK. A prompt box appears requesting me to select which dimensions I want to add to the new design table. I'll add all three, length, width, and height. And let's click OK. Here's our design table. A design table is basically an embedded spreadsheet. Depending upon which version of Microsoft Excel you're working with, your screen may look slightly different. An additional thing to mention here: if you do happen to have another Excel document open on your computer, it's a good idea to close it before creating your design table. Okay, let's learn how to manipulate and modify our design table. I am able to freely drag it around my workspace by grabbing the diagonal dash border. Release the mouse to reposition. We can easily resize it. And basically, you can work with this table just like a regular Excel spreadsheet. Let's rename this configuration from default to 50 by 50 by 10. A descriptive name is always helpful. Now let's right-click and copy this row, and right-click and paste it here, and paste again. Let's change the names and the corresponding dimensions. Okay, and let's change the height to 20 and 30. To exit the table, simply click in the graphic area. SOLIDWORKS lets us know that the design table generated 3 configurations named as we'd specified. Let's click OK. And let's go to the Configuration tab. Here's our original configuration and the 3 new configurations driven by the design table. Let's right-click on the default configuration and select Delete, since we don't need that configuration anymore. Notice the dimensions in magenta in my graphic area. This indicates that they are driven by the design table. Okay, let's make some modifications to our part. Let's right-click on this face and insert a sketch. Centerline Tool. We'll create a construction line from corner to corner. And let's place a circle about here. Right-click, select, close the tool. And let's Control-select the construction line and the center of my circle. Oh, I've got a tangent relation here. Let me delete that. Okay, now let's select the center of my circle and the line, and add a midpoint relation. Let's smart dimension our sketch now. Let's start with the circle's diameter. Let's say 20 millimeters. OK. And we'll name it diameter. Let's exit the sketch. Now we'll activate the Extruded Cut tool. For depth, enter 5 millimeters. And let's click OK. I'd like to rename this dimension as well. Let's call it depth. And click OK. Now let's right-click on the design table we just created. Here we can select Edit Table or Edit in New Window. Let's just work with the Edit Table option. Here we can add more parameters to our table, such as color, description, part number, tolerance. Let's cancel out of there. And let's reposition the table a little higher in the graphic area. To move the model, press the Control key and hold down the middle mouse button and drag up or down. Let's add 3 more parameters to our table. This cell is selected. Let's double-click on this feature. State of Extrude 1. Our options here are to choose whether we want it suppressed or unsuppressed. There's 2 values for this column, unsuppressed or suppressed, and we can just simply type that in there. We can also simply enter the letters U for unsuppressed and S for suppressed. The cut extrude is unsuppressed in my first configuration, suppressed in the second, and unsuppressed in the third. Okay, let's add a couple more parameters to our design table. We'll double-click on the diameter dimension. Now let's enter some different values here. 20 in the first row, 10, and then 30. Lastly, let's add hole depth. We double-click on that dimension. Our value will be 5 for the first configuration, 10 for the second configuration, and let's say 2 for the last configuration. Let's exit table editing mode. And let's take a look at our configurations. Notice we don't have a hole in our second configuration, and that is, of course, because we suppressed it in our design tree. Here's configuration number 3, where the hole is not suppressed. Let's activate the second configuration. Go to the Feature Manager design tree, right-click on Cut Extrude and unsuppress it. Back to the Configurations tab. Let's edit the table. The Add Rows and Columns window opens. Let's cancel out of that. Here we are at our table. As we see, the Cut Extrude is now unsuppressed in all 3 configurations. Finally, to delete a design table, simply right-click on it in the tree and select Delete. And this concludes our lesson about design tables.